Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Written in Melanin podcast, where we bring color to your pages, one word at a time. We are writers of color, spreading the words of writers of color, and as always, we're here to talk about books, writing, and everything that happens between the pages. We welcome you to this episode of the podcast, wherever you may be listening at. Enjoy! This is your content warning. While this episode of the podcast is not explicit, Porsha Deun is an erotic fiction writer, and this episode of the podcast will discuss sensitive topics such as BDSM. If you are uncomfortable hearing matters such as that, I would highly advise that you skip this episode of the podcast and tune in next week when we speak with our next author. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. All right, if you are still listening, I'm going to assume that you are fine listening to this conversation. You have been warned. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Written in Melanin podcast. My name is C, better known as C. Benson.
And I'm Ashley D.
Porsha, sorry.
And today we are here to talk with Porsha about her two books, Love Lost and Love Lost Forever. If you haven't heard her read her story yet, you can go back to the previous episode of the podcast and listen to it. You can go back to the previous video on YouTube and listen to it and then come back to this. That way you're all caught up. So when she's talking about it, it's spoiler free. Cool, great. All right. So without further ado, we're just going to start in on these questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So I like to start with the easy questions. So your first question. When did you first realize that you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, geez. I dibbled and dabbled. Like, I did some poetry when I was a teenager and wrote some short stories, but never quite took it seriously until maybe about, this is 2019, so about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, where I took it seriously, like, I should probably write this dream I had down. And let's see what happens with it. So yeah, about 4 years ago, really.
Okay, so I think you fall into the majority where we're kind of like, we know we want to be writers, but like life, and then life is just like, yeah, you should really be doing this other thing, right? And then we're like, okay, let's give it a try.
Right.
So you said that it came from a dream. So is it the first book or the second book, like the middle, the end? Like what part came to you in a dream per se?
That's an awkward question, simply because when I first started writing this, I had no intentions of it being a series. It was just going to be like a standalone, its own little thing. And as I was going through like the second and third draft, I was just adding more and adding more and adding more. And it got so big to the point where Microsoft Word was acting very funky. So I split it into two with the intent that I would put it back together as one when I got ready to publish it. But as I kept working on it, I said, no, you actually have two separate books here. So from the first draft of Love Lost, there's probably about 12 chapters in what ended up being the actual Love Lost book that's still there, and the other 6 from the original, from the first draft, is in the second book. So I added a lot right into the middle of the story.
Well, that's like a wonderful thing to be able to do, because I know I can only speak for myself, but like as a writer, it's very easy to be like, okay, so this is all that I had. Now what do I do?
Right.
So I guess you have 2 books, right? Is there going to be a third, or?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a third. Originally, there wasn't going to be a third. Even when I published the first one late last year, I wasn't expecting a third. And like I published the first one, and then I was giving edits to the second book. And as I like to tell people, the characters kind of started talking to me about other stuff that wasn't in the second book. And it was just like, no, there's more, right? And I'm like, really?
It's like, it doesn't stop here. We have to keep going.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just one of those moments where I was like, okay, so I started jotting down scenes here and scenes there and some dialogue here and dialogue there. So I'm about halfway through the first draft of that one, I would say.
Okay. Cool. So I'll keep an eye out for that because I'm currently saving my coins to go get the first two books because after that author read, I was like, I kind of need to know what happens. I need to know the rest of the story. So I guess for those of our listeners who only heard the author read and haven't heard of your books, like if you had to pitch your book in like 3 sentences or less, how would you do that?
In 3 sentences. Wow. Okay.
The challenge.
So basically, to cover the entire series, there's a rekindled love between two very independent people, and that rekindled love brings the best out of some people and the absolute worst out of others. Okay. That's probably the best way I could sum it up.
Sounds good. I mean, I am excited to read it just from like I said, that little tidbit that we got. So I need to know where that leads to, especially with the baby oil. Like that was not a good place to end it. I was just like, wait, what? So
I have a question. So because this is a romance and it is erotica, is that something you always wanted to write, or did you write other things beforehand? Because I know when I first started writing, I wrote a lot of other things. So did you start with that, or was it something that you just kind of fell into?
My early writings definitely did not include erotica. There may have been, some romance, a couple of love stories here and there. Some of them were, in all honesty, a bit more tragic and dark in my earlier doings, like, someone being addicted to drugs and it being too late before they kick the habit, and how that affect other people and things like that. So some of the things I wrote early on, very dark and twisted, kind of like. This story kind of just came to me, and I started writing it. I enjoy reading erotica. It's probably one of my more favorite genres to read, actually. So, yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I have been hard pressed to find people who don't enjoy reading erotica, whether they admit it or not.
Really, I have the exact opposite.
Really?
Yeah. Even trying to find like reviewers and stuff like that. Oh, erotica's not really my thing, but best of luck to you.
I feel like erotica is like that genre that falls into like your dirty little secret type thing. Like it's on the bookshelf behind the other books. Like you have a whole collection, you have your favorite authors, but you don't want people knowing and coming up to your house and being like, why you got half naked people on the cover? Like, what you be reading?
See, what you have to do is get hardcovers and take the book jackets off. I personally hate book jackets. So I don't, and I am one of those people, even though I do, and I have read erotica, usually it's on accident, because literally I think the first book I ever read, someone gave to me, like a librarian gave to me. And you never think that when you're in high school, your librarian is going to give you something like that. So she gave it to me and I read it and I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with this? But I think there are a lot of people who wrote erotica and romance into this like thing of that's not the thing that you admit to reading. That's not something that's not highbrow literature. So a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't want to read that because I don't want to seem like I'm not intelligent or like I don't like intelligent things. And it's you get the people who are like, I want people to think I'm smart when they see me reading a book.
I feel like reading a book is totally a personal choice. But like I get what you're saying. Like you want people to feel like you're smart. I feel like in my experience it's more like people don't want you to get the assumption that they're unhappy with like their sex life, and so that's why they're reading erotica. And it's just like, no, it's actually really good, especially when it's written well. It's like, you know, it's entertaining. It's entertainment. That's what books are written for. You know, you know, if you want to go buy a nonfiction erotica and, you know, learn something, there's nothing wrong with expanding your horizons. You know, I just feel like you have to like own your sexuality, and people want to like shame people for it. It's just like, but if you know that somebody watches porn, it's like you're not going to think, oh, they're such a bad person for doing that. It's like you just kind of assume that everybody does it, you know, but then you don't talk about it.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the way a lot of older adults feel about YA. Like, that's not for me. I can't read it because I'm not a kid. And it's like, well, who do you think is writing these books? Like, anybody can relate to it. It doesn't matter who it's written for or whether it's written for somebody or not.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna throw a plug in here for Porsha. Like, if you're listening to this on the podcast or you're watching this, Porsha is looking for reviewers of her book, and it is erotica. So if you are not afraid to be like, I read erotica and I am proud of it, please reach out to us so that we can put you in touch with her so you can give her a review for her book, because I'm sure that it is amazing. Because again, if you heard the first part, you're gonna want to read the rest. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
And I wanted to ask another question relating to that, because I feel like also you talk about the topic of BDSM in your book. And I think a lot of people, when they think of BDSM or when they hear it, it's this taboo subject, like, oh, people who practice that are not people that I want to be around, or I don't know anybody like that. And I wanted to ask, like, what made you decide to tackle that topic?
And I have something to add to that after that.
Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to add that in there is because if you work really anywhere, you probably know someone who's into the BDSM lifestyle and you just don't know it. It's one of those things where people in that lifestyle kind of stay hidden into themselves. They're not publicly walking around with, and I don't recommend for anyone to do this, even at a play party, around with floggers attached to their pants, attached to their hip or anything like that. And people aren't even in public, like having their submissive crawl for them or barking demands, or I shouldn't say barking demands, but having those. But it's a part of people's lives. I know people who are very successful that are in the lifestyle. I know some people who work at a McDonald's that are in the lifestyle. It's a wide range of people in there, people of color, everyone that's in there. And I think I really want to try to normalize it a little bit more. Because you could be out at a restaurant and see a group of folks there and they're all together and it's a mix of different people. And you could just think it's a bunch of friends or a work group or something that's out together. And it's actually a kinky group having a munch, but they're just in regular clothes having a good time with other like-minded kinky folks. So it's not such a to me, it's not such a taboo thing. And I don't think it really should be. So I included that in the books in hope to make it something that's a little less taboo.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to what happens behind closed doors, you really shouldn't be like shamed for whatever you're into, especially if it's between two consenting adults. And like the part that you read to us, it's just kind of like it was very clear that both of them were consenting to the situation. It wasn't like he was forcing himself on her or she was forcing him to do something that made him uncomfortable. Like, they were into it. They knew what the ground rules were. They understood the situation, and like it was good for them, you know. Mm-hmm. I think it starts crossing the line when you are trying to force someone into that situation. And sort of add on to that question, it's like, 50 Shades of Grey is that very prolific work of BDSM, and it caught a lot of attention because I never read it because it's not my cup of tea per se, but I know that people were talking about it.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, I think there was a part in there where she was like using the safe word and he ignored her. Yeah. So since you write in that genre, particularly regarding BDSM, how do you feel when authors or include things like that or try to normalize that aspect of it?
I think any author that gets into it, and not to beat on or say anything negative about any authors that try to tackle this, but if you're going to write it, at least if you don't have experience in it yourself, know someone who does, that's comfortable with telling you about how the lifestyle is. Yes, 50 Shades of Grey put a lot of the BDSM world on a larger map, both for good and bad reasons. Was it a proper reflection of BDSM? Not necessarily, no. At least not in my opinion, or in the opinion of anyone else that I know that lives in the lifestyle. Like, no one has a contract. Where, so, that book, for a good portion of a chapter, it's just describing this crazy contract. No one has that. People have discussions and have adult conversations, and that's something that I think the male lead in 50 Shades was not quite able to do, just because he was so emotionally stunted from his childhood. And that's one of the things that bothered me. I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this story in particular and have it with two adults who knew about the lifestyle and lived the lifestyle, and it wasn't one kind of coaxing the other one into it. Because every story that I've read that has some type of BDSM element, whether it's the actual acts or in play scenes, or if it's the power exchange aspect of it, every leading male is emotionally messed up from some traumatic event in their childhood. And that bothers me, because that's not the case with most of the people I know who live the lifestyle. Like, they had normal childhoods just like I did. Or, most people do. And that was one of the things that kind of bothered me and pushed me to write this, was just to say, normal people do this too. Like, what society would say is a normal person, they participate in this too.
Okay. I have to process that a little bit. Go ahead.
I think a big thing about it that the 50 Shades of Grey books miss is consent. And people are talking about it a lot more now, just in general conversations with Me Too and everything. And 50 Shades of Grey misses consent by a yard. It's important with those kinds of relationships, and I won't speak like I know a whole lot. But if you don't have consent, and if everybody's not consenting to it, then it's no longer BDSM. You're taking what you like.
You're being a bully.
Right. You're
steamrolling someone else into something they know nothing of, and that's what Christian did to Anastasia. As much acclaim and credit as that book got, that's essentially what Christian did to her. He steamrolled her. She knew nothing. She had never even had sex before. She was a virgin at the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yep.
I'm sorry, what? So we went from like no experience at all, just straight to BDSM?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
And this is an odd comparison, but it's like it's like some Christians and some bad Christians who take the Bible and they
over the head.
Right, and for someone who knows nothing of the Bible and who has heard all of these horror stories, to just have these people telling you things that you have absolutely no idea if this is true or not, because you've never read the Bible. So yeah, it's if you don't know anything about the lifestyle, that book is not great.
It will mess you up.
Yeah.
And it's gotten people in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen stories and stuff come out on the news and other outlets where people read 50 Shades. Someone read 50 Shades and was like, oh, I want to try this. And some young girl gets on some BDSM related website or gets on some dating site saying, I want to try BDSM. And then you have the abusers and the users that are preying on young, naive girls like that. And they end up in horrific and very tragic situations.
When those books first came out, there were a lot of stories that came out of just, especially young girls getting hurt.
Yeah.
just because they didn't know, or their boyfriends were like, well, let's try it. It seems fun. And you know nothing about the lifestyle, and you know nothing about what you're getting yourself into. And there's no conversation. It's just like, let's do this. Let's try it.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of that being said, I guess my question for you, Porsha, is while you're tackling this, I guess, what are if you had to give advice on people who may read your book and may be interested or may have read something like 50 Shades of Grey, it's like, what advice, I guess, would you give them for tackling something like this in a safe and healthy type of way, and not like getting on a website and being, hey, like, I'm interested, and then like being chained to like some stairs or something while somebody kicks you and it's like, hey, I'm getting off on this, we don't want that.
Right. I would say definitely research. Research. There are websites out there, social media sites that are dedicated to those in the lifestyle. And on those you can find, and there's a number of them out there, but on those you can find groups. And I would say if you create your profile, absolutely do not put on there that you're new and that you're looking to get into the lifestyle, because as soon as you put that on there, everyone who's a predator, every male or female, because it goes both ways, that's a predator, will try to attach themselves to you in some way. But don't go to play parties first. That's another way you get in trouble. Don't go to play parties first. Go to what they call a munch, which is what I mentioned earlier, a group that's at a regular restaurant or a karaoke bar. They may have a designated day or time that they do it. Say every, I don't know, third Thursday of the month or whatever, they go have karaoke at a bar, and it's just a large group of folk, and you can talk to them and ask people about their experiences and
sort of
things that
out.
Get advice and stuff like that. But geez, don't just say, oh, I thought what Christian did to Anastasia on this page or whatever was really cool, and I want somebody to do that to me. No, because that's how you end up in a hospital. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing and using some of those instruments can get you hurt, and especially from if you're a guy and you call yourself wanting to be a dominant or whatnot. Look up the laws in your states, because in many states, BDSM, technically a lot of those acts, whether if you two are consenting of it, is illegal, especially if the person that you're acting with gets hurt and ends up in the hospital. There have been guys who have gone to jail and been charged with, assault and battery, because them and their partner went too far. They didn't have the language between themselves to know when to stop, or the experience to know when to stop, and the girl couldn't stop bleeding, and so she ends up in the hospital. He takes her, and they see the marks and stuff on her, and of course they automatically think he's been beating on her, which he has, but it was consensual and it was in a certain setting. But because they didn't have that experience with each other, and knowing medical history, because like one of the articles that came up not long after 50 Shades came out was a guy, him and his girlfriend were playing. He didn't know that she was anemic, and she didn't know she was either. So he was, hitting her with the different toys. She started bleeding. The bleeding wouldn't stop. And it got to the point where she, was starting to pass out. Like it got dangerous. So he rushed her to the hospital. They arrested him, and he was charged for assault and battery, even though he was constantly saying it was consensual, and she was saying it was consensual. But because of the severity of it, they didn't need her to not press charges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just on that, like, yes, please do your research. Just some of those, like, you see on, like, if you ever go to that side of the internet. I actually went to a class. I went to a convention, and there was a class there where they were teaching people about the intricate knots that they sometimes use in those types of settings. And they were telling you, like, a lot of, especially when it gets to be intricate, you can cut off somebody's blood supply. You can do anything. You can mess up nerves and things. Mm-hmm. So this isn't something that you can just, I'm gonna jump head first. You have to do your research. It's like with anything. You have to do your research. You can't just become a doctor and say one day I want to be a doctor and go be a doctor. Right. You have to take classes. You have to do all of these things. Yeah. So it's just really important that people understand that it's about being knowledgeable about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess for my 2 cents, I'll also say have like adult conversations. Like if you're adult enough to take on this act, be adult enough to have the conversation, to do the research, to set clear-cut boundaries. Yeah. And, if nothing else, pull a Kevin Hart, shout pineapples and be done with the whole thing. Like know your boundaries and know what you are and what you're not willing to do, and don't let someone coerce you into doing it. Even if your limit is at a 7 and they want to go to a 10, if you're at a 7, then stop there. You don't have to go to a 10 to make somebody else feel comfortable, because again, if you're an adult and they're an adult, they should understand that they can't force you to go somewhere that you're not comfortable going. Right. But let's kind of move this to a lighter note. Kind of back on track. So I guess as a writer, not necessarily, the whole BDSM standpoint, but just as erotica as a whole, what is the most challenging aspect of writing erotica in your experience?
Sometimes it's making each of the erotic scenes unique and not repeating what I just did 3 chapters ago. Because you can have, people have various ways of having fun in the bedroom, and just trying to find different ways to pull that out, and put that in with my characters, so it doesn't seem like they're having the same old sex every time.
They're not in a rut.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Make it more interesting. How can I make this scene not necessarily more steamy than the last one, but different, steamy in a different way? And trying to remember, what have I had them do already?
I guess I can understand that. I guess from my perspective, the reason why erotica has always sort of been interesting to me is because, I've been married for 4 years, so at the end of the day, it's all the same act. We get from point A to point B, so it's just it's always interesting when you read a book, especially when there are multiple scenes and you're just okay, I'm not bored, Right. So to accomplish that, it's I give you credit, man. I give you props, because I know that cannot be an easy thing. But along with erotica, you also work, romance and love and the ups and downs. It's not just, and I think two things before I get sidetracked. I think one misconception a lot of people have about erotica is that it's just nothing but 100 pages of people having sex with each other. Right. And that's not the case. It's it's a romance. It's just those scenes, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna pull Twilight here because it's the first idea first book that came to my mind. But it's right. Just they're not glancing over it right. in a YA book, where it's that's what they're doing, but you just assume that the reader knows, and you don't go into detail. Whereas erotica is oh yeah, no, we know what we're doing, and I'm gonna tell you what they're doing in detail so that you get a feel for what they're doing.
Right.
But I had a point and I just talked myself out of it. Good gosh. Ooh. Oh, the question was, so the romance in your books, do you prefer to write the romance, or do you prefer the erotic part, or does it sort of for you go hand in hand?
I think it goes hand in hand a bit, because to me, you can't have the erotic part without the romance. And I know some authors do this, and not knocking anyone who does, but to just have a bunch of erotic scenes with people who are practically strangers with each other, to me, doesn't feel natural. or it's for me, it's not something that I don't think I can write in that way. So to have the romance with it, and I think that's another one of my challenges, is to make sure I have enough actual story to go along with the erotic part, because I know that's, like you said, the assumption that a lot of people have with erotica, but some authors do write, or erotica that way, where it's
100
just
pages.
Sex. It's pages and pages of sex. I wanted my characters to be people, and I wanted them to be relatable and individuals that people can see themselves in, or get attached to and care about. You don't care about nobody if you just screwing around. So so I wanted to make sure I kept it relatable and have my characters be real to to everyone else as they are to me. So it's a challenge, but sometimes writing a romance is a bit easier than the erotic part.
I can see that. I can definitely see that, because like I write romance, and it's like there are times where I'm just like, I guess this point where I'm just like, I don't really want to be explicit because I'm not an erotic writer. Like,
right.
That's just not my MO. Mostly because I know this sounds crazy. My mom reads my books, and I'm just like, I don't want to put that in there. Like, this whole podcast here, I'm just gonna not talk to her about this one, because it's just like, yeah, I'm an adult, you're an adult.
Say that.
But
yeah, my brother has.
My mom has read the first one. She hasn't read the second one yet. And my grandmother, who is highly religious, has her degree from theology school and everything, read the first one. She hasn't read the second one yet. And other family members who are, big into church and stuff have read the first book. And I remember getting a call at 6:00 in the morning from one of my older cousins saying, "Now, Porsha, how can I read this and then turn around and read my Bible?" And even like my grandmother, we had a talk and discussion afterwards when she got done reading the book. And, in the end, she told me, she said, even though, you had that other stuff in it, and it was like, peeking in on somebody's bedroom, which no one wants to do, she said, you still wrote a good story nevertheless. So for me, it was one of those things where it's like, we're all adults. So, and, especially if you're religious, if you believe in the Bible, besides Adam, Eve, and Jesus, everybody that's ever existed is the result of sex. So
fair enough point. I mean, I can't argue with that.
It is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My brother found out about my podcast, and I was like, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to them all this week, and I'm like, I just hope you missed this one, because I don't know. I don't want that phone call. I don't want to have that phone call.
It's not, and the thing is, it's not bad. It's just like, it could be an awkward conversation. I guess.
Like, I can't look you in the eye and have this conversation. So let's just not do it.
No, it's like, I know that you know, and you know that I know. Let's just, this mutual knowing, let's just exist in that and not actually talk about it. Because it's just like, with my mom, it's like, I exist. Clearly. My brother exists. Clearly. So, I'm not dumb. I recognize that things happen behind closed doors, but that doesn't mean I have to have a conversation with my mother about the intricacies of it, Because
when you talk about it, then it becomes real. Then I have to acknowledge that these things are real, and I don't want to acknowledge that those things are real with my parents or with my siblings. It's,
in my mind, it's so much more basic than that. If I talk to you about it, that means I have to understand the conversation that we're having, which in my mind, I have to, on some level, imagine the act, and I don't want that image in my head at all. Ever. It's like, I'm good with just like, because with my mind, I see like, the cartoon version of my parents is like, ha-da-da-da-da, and then like a stork comes and I exist. I recognize that that's not how it happens. But that's how I cope with it. And I like to keep it that way. But I digress. Porsha, do you ever find it awkward explaining to people that you write erotica, and specifically BDSM erotica?
Sometimes yes, it depends on the setting. Some of my coworkers know, some of them do not. And having that conversation with some of them was easy, and some not so much. Especially, bless her heart. So the president company, she knew I wrote a book and she knew it published, and we had one of our all staff meetings, and she announced in front of everyone that I had just published a book. And everyone starts clapping and they're cheering, and I'm kind of like shrinking in my seat because I know it's coming. And someone asks, well, what's your book about? And I looked at them and I looked around the room and everyone's looking at me, and I was like, it's very adult content. How about that? We just want some adult content.
Well then.
So, yeah, it depends really, because even when I do vendor events and I'm selling my books, like there was one I did, and I'm not sure how this happened, but I ended up at the table next to me had a little girl that was selling lip gloss, and my books being about, exactly, I can see your facial expression, exactly. So my books being about what they are, as props on my table, I had a pair of handcuffs and the flogger. So I ended up having to remove them from the table because she kept coming over to the table and she would pick the handcuffs up. Mom, look at these. And turn back to me, what do you have these for? And I'm like, they go along with the book. Oh, okay. Well, what's this? Picking the flogger up. I said, baby, that's not a toy. Put
it. That's not for you.
Yeah, and then she's like, well, can I read your book? I said, it's not a children's book.
No,
and then finally, like, her mom got her and had her come back to the table. But it was like, still, even when people come up to the table, how do I explain this book when sometimes I can look out the corner of my eye and see this little girl staring me down my esophagus? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doing one of those numbers. And I'm like, how can I explain this book in a very PG way?
See, that's the moment where you're gonna pull her mom aside and be like, look, I don't know how this happens, but this is what my book is about, and your little girl is right here. I'm gonna need her to be on this side of the table, as far away from me, so I can do my job and not interfere with her lip gloss.
Right, unless you want to be explaining some very uncomfortable things to your daughter.
Whew. Yes.
That would be my question, my answer to all of her questions. What's this? Ask your mama. What's this? Ask your mama.
Right.
What's the book about? Ask your mama. Can I read your book?
That
Ask
is
your mama.
That is a conversation for your mother. I am not it. I am not it.
But I have another question for you.
Okay.
So, how do you deal with writer's block? Well, do you experience it? And if you do, how do you deal with it?
I do experience it. It doesn't happen often because I usually try to head it off. One, like doing self-care for me is one of those big things that helps to prevent writer's block in the first place. If I've been, meditating on even a somewhat regular basis for the week or whatnot, or, take the time to take a nice long hot steamy bath, or go on a walk, zone out to music, and do nothing else, or even just sometimes sitting in silence and and just being still and listening to nature, listening to the universe. That kind of keeps writer's block away. If I'm making sure I do that and kind of just check in with myself, make sure I'm all right. Like, hey, you feeling all right? You drinking enough water? Things like that. So that for me usually helps. If I haven't been doing that, writer's block definitely will come. Like, there's no doubt about it.
I think that's something, right? I think that's something that as writers we often forget because we're not doing strenuous activity. We're sitting down in a chair at a keyboard, so we're not thinking, okay, maybe I need to get up and move around. Maybe I need to go outside. Maybe I need to change the scenery. Maybe I need to drink some water. you know, because I'm gonna tell you, I'm 100% guilty. Like, I have this jug and it's about like this big, and it sits on my desk. I fill it up, it's a gallon, and it has the timestamps on it, and it says 7 p.m. And I will sit there and look at it and be like, ain't nothing coming to me. Why, God? Why is my writing not happening? I'll look at the water. And I
used to carry that water, the big water jugs that they sell at the store, and it does not help. It just makes it like that thing just stares at me, and I'm like, I'm not gonna drink you. I'm not gonna finish you. It's not gonna happen.
Right.
And you want to know why? For me, the biggest thing is I hate going up to have to go pee every 5 minutes. If I'm trying to write, you know what the biggest, like, I'm in the middle of a sentence, gotta stop, gotta go pee. Nah, I don't need that in my life.
Between water and tea,
where I've like been holding it because I'm like, I need to finish this scene. I have to finish writing the scene out, or finish up this chapter, and I've been holding it. And then when I finally go, it's like I'm running.
Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible because like I'll go to work like when I'm not at work right now, but when I'm working full time, I'll have my water jug on my table, and I've been drinking more water, and I'm noticing because I'm like, I just went to the bathroom. Why do you have to go to the bathroom right now? Why can't it wait? And it's not even just the water, it's the tea. 'Cause I drink tea all day, and I can drink tea all day. And I forget how much I've drank until I have to go to the bathroom. And then it's like, look, can we go another 30 minutes, maybe an hour? Just give me an hour and we can go. Yeah.
It's amazing how you can suddenly have conversations with your bladder, and you're like, okay, look, so we just went, right? I'm gonna go one more time, but then we're gonna wait like a full hour before we have to go back, okay? Like you're talking to it like it's a child, and then it's just like, well, no, we have to go again. And you're just like, it's only been 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
It's like, look, we gonna go another hour, and then we'll go to the bathroom, and then we'll be cool. Right? It's like, I just sat down. We can't do this. I just sat down.
Right. So, that being said, we do have to wrap this up. So I have 2 more questions for you. But while we're on this topic, this is for all of us. What are, I guess, 3 things that you would recommend as a writer to do for self-care? I know that we just said, drink your water. You're going to have to go to the bathroom, but drink your water. What else would you ladies suggest?
Meditate. That's a big one for me. Reading other books. Like, definitely, just because you're writing doesn't mean that you stop reading.
Right. Remember why you became a writer in the first place. Yeah, it's not because, for most people.
And read books that aren't in your genre.
For sure.
Yeah.
And horizon.
Yeah.
I guess I would say turn off your computer. Like, step away from it. Like, just be a person and not necessarily a writer. Just be like alive and kind of revel in that fact that you're here in this moment and you're good, whether like you have both your heads, good Lord, both your hands, both your feet, whatever your situation is, just like be alive, appreciate that. And like when you're getting stressed out, writer's block, tired, whatever, it's just like you're good and you can take a minute to be good. And if you're not writing every second of every day, it is okay, because guess what? I have to tell myself this. It's like the world has gone so many years. Well, we're in 2019 years without my book. If they go another day, they will be fine.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents. Spend it how you like.
3 things. I'll definitely second reading other books, because I started off reading just a wide range of things, and then all of a sudden I couldn't pick anything up, or I wasn't picking anything up that wasn't fantasy. So yeah, read other things. I don't know. I think you both said everything. Get rest.
Yes.
Make sure you're sleeping. I know I have this thing of either undersleeping or oversleeping. I've discovered that I can no longer pull all-nighters. It's not in me anymore. I'm too old. Back, like, not just to turn off your computer, back away from the electronics. A lot of the times it can feel like your phone is attached to your hip. When I get off of here, I'm going to turn mine off. And I think I don't know. Make sure you're eating. Make sure you're getting food. Make sure you're getting up to get that food. Like when you're going to take those bathroom breaks, eat.
Yes. Nutritional food, not just like potato chips and Cheez-Its.
Yeah, I forget to eat all the time, especially when I'm not like at work every day. I forget to eat breakfast. Breakfast is good for you. You may not like eating it, but breakfast is good for you. And I think that's it.
Okay, so for all you listeners out there, those are your self-care tips from writers to writers. Please take care of yourself. We don't want you passing out at your keyboard because most of us probably work in a quiet environment where people don't come to check on us very often because we're probably snappish people when people interrupt us. So you don't want to pass out and nobody knows. But 2 more things, and then we are going to wrap this podcast up. One, I love asking this question. If you could go back and tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid.
Well, that sums that up.
Very simple answer.
Yeah, but it's very, very true advice. I feel like the best advice sometimes is the ones that doesn't need to be explained. You know. And then last question. Since we were talking about reading and, reading other things, Ashley said something that kind of triggered this question, where sometimes we pick up books and we're just like, we used to read all the time. And then I'm finding also as an adult, it's just like, I just don't read as much as I used to, as much as I want to. And it's just kind of like, do you feel like you get a reader's block? Like, I can't. I want to, but I can't. I just can't read someone else's work right now.
Not necessarily reader's block, but I can find myself getting blocked with a particular book that I'm reading. I just can't get through this book for whatever reason. It may actually be a good book, but for some reason I'm not connecting with it. And it happens.
What about you, Ashley? Do you ever experience reader's block to that extent?
I've been experiencing reader's block for like 4 years now. And it's been a good thing. So my cousin lives with me, and she gives, I give her books and she gives me books. She actually gave me Game of Thrones, which I should have had finished by now. And the screenplay for the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And I'm going to try to read those, but I'm still reading, but I find that I read a lot more stuff online than I do actual physical books, which makes me very sad because I used to be able to read books cover to cover, like 10, 20 books in a week. And now I don't so much, but I've been trying to get back into it. But I find myself saying all the time, like, I don't have time. And then I'm staring at my computer, or I'm staring at my phone, trying to write, or on social media, or talking. And it's like, if you just put the phone down and just turn the computer off, you'd have time. You have all this time. You get off work at 2, you can read for at least 30 minutes. So just finding the time and telling yourself, look, you have time. Just declutter, put everything away, and read.
Yeah. I think I kind of fall into that same category, sort of in between. It's like there are certain books that I'm just like, why can't I get through it? But also telling myself that I don't have time, because it's just like I'm doing 1,000,001 things. By the time I get to reading, it's just like, oh, I can do that tomorrow. I can do that later. I can do that whatever. But for me, I've learned that, one, I actually have to take the time to block out, just like I do for everything else. It's like, I'm going to spend an hour and I'm not going to do anything except read a book. And I've also learned that the secret for me is, like, I can't read on my phone because my phone is so full of distractions. I'll get a message, or I'll see the time, or I'll see a notification from like Twitter or Instagram. I'll be like, ooh, somebody retweeted my tweet. Let me go check that out right now, But it's just like, when I am reading an actual physical book in my hands, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why I enjoy doing this in the first place. But then life will be like, oh, you have time to sit down and just read a book? Let me throw something at you real quick. Let me take your time away. But that was, I don't know. I think that's something as writers we have to remember to do, is to read, because we became writers because we enjoy reading. You know, if we didn't, this would not have been the career path that we chose.
Yeah.
Right.
But that is it. I feel like there are like a million and one other things that I want to ask you, but in the purposes of not making this a 3-hour long podcast, we're gonna end it here. For everyone listening or watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Again, I am C.E. Benson. I was here with Porsha and Ashley D. So follow all of us on social media because we're awesome people. Share the podcast because it's amazing and you listen to it this far, so other people probably would too. And that is it. So until next time, we hope your books are interesting and your days are lovely. Bye.